Quick note before we get started, this review covers only the single-player campaign of Homeworld 3. For thoughts on the multiplayer skirmish and war games co-op mode, see the Homeworld 3 multiplayer review. Considering that Homeworld 2 came out more than 20 years ago, it's a welcome surprise how little had to change, and how little complexity had to be sacrificed, to bring this classic, large-scale space strategy gameplay up to modern standards and deliver a visually spectacular and mechanically varied campaign for Homeworld 3.
Telemetry looks good, Intel.
Building and controlling an armada of strikecraft, frigates, and capital ships in full 3D space is certainly a little trickier to wrap your head around than most RTS games, but thanks to the ability to pause and give orders at any time, you can grow into command at your own pace. The payoff is more than worth it. This campaign invites you to embrace your inner Admiral Akbar and walk into traps just to blast your way out.
Hostile frigate in effective range. Fire around. Crossover.
Upgrade complete.
Using a now well-worn template for soft rebooting an older series, this story follows a brand new character who must seek out the original protagonist after they go missing. Despite that cliché, Imogen S'jet's search for answers about what happened to Hiigaran S'jet's lost fleet is delivered with convincing emotion. That includes some very reasonable conflict between her and her second-in-command, as he tries to keep her on the task of tracking down the looming new threat to Hiigaran and the galaxy at large that they were sent out after in the first place.
This is about the whole damn galaxy.
Fully animated cutscenes make Imogen feel more human and relatable than Hiigaran ever did, despite being hooked into the same fleet-controlling machines, wearing the same wetsuit, and floating in another goo-filled tank with her eyes closed. But she does get to stretch her legs and emote more during visions she has while the mothership hyperspace jumps between missions, and that's where we get to know her a little better. These are a sharp contrast to the massive scale of the city-sized mothership flying through wreckage of even more gargantuan megastructures. We only ever really see 4 characters, so it's almost like watching a stage play. One of these characters is the antagonist, the Queen, who comes across as a bit over-the-top maniacal, but she chews the scenery with gusto and conveys a menacing, wild-eyed sort of madness. There's something clearly not right with her, and that allows her to be tragic and sympathetic in certain moments. But while her use of hyperspace as a weapon sounds cool, it mostly happens off-screen, and we aren't given a real sense of how it's causing all this destruction. The one time we see it in action on a small scale raises a bunch of intriguing possibilities for how it could be used in battle, but then, anticlimactically, it's never seen again. So, while the characters work on an emotional level, the overarching story does end up feeling a little bit lost amid its tangle of lore about space ancients.
Sensor alert, enemy strike craft.
When the view zooms out to the battlefield, Homeworld 3 immediately recaptures the feeling of commanding a fleet of starships, and being able to select a group and put them into one of several formations and toggle between 3 different behavior stances is as powerful as ever. You'll get the best results by meticulously organizing your ships into control groups, optimizing formations, and prioritizing targets. But once you're confident you have the upper hand, you can select every combat-capable ship and order them to fire at will. I'm often willing to take more losses than I need to in battle just so I can zoom in, hit backspace to turn off the interface, and enjoy the show.
Recon production complete.
Homeworld 3's 13 campaign missions took me around 10 hours to complete on the default difficulty, and they're easily the most diverse of the series, both visually and in their objectives. That's mostly because of the new direction and map design. By contrast to the mostly empty voids of previous games, here there are so many massive objects to navigate through that space can feel downright claustrophobic and cluttered. There's still huge maps relative to most real-time strategy games, of course, but scaling back on the scope means there's a lot less downtime as you wait for the fleet to reach its intended target.
Group 1 lost.
Several missions are set within these enormous metallic superstructures, but before that can get old, others take us to very different and visually striking regions of space. The opening sequence has the mothership lifting off and doing its shakedown cruise within the atmosphere of Hiigaran. In another, we have to make it through an asteroid field without getting smashed, or navigate through an enormous ice sheet undetected, and then lead a small strike group to take out explosive targets without support, and more.
Power regulators destroyed.
Managing all of that is no small feat, of course, and the controls for Homeworld have always been a bit tricky. There is a whole extra axis of movement you have to account for than in most other real-time strategy games, after all. Homeworld 3 allows you to use WASD controls to fly freely through space, with the option of anchoring to a ship, or you can use the Homeworld Remastered style controls to lock the view to objects at all times. I mostly prefer the old controls simply because it's quite easy to accidentally drift off away from the action, but it's great to see this flexibility along with a whole menu of tweaks you can make to customize the interface. But no matter what you choose, getting your ships to move to a precise location can involve swinging the camera around so you can view it from different angles, and that can be pretty frustrating to pull off in a hurry. However, in the single-player campaign at least, the pressure to get it right is completely relieved by the fact that you can pause or slow time with the push of a button and fiddle with things until you've positioned your orders exactly the way you want them. That said, whether or not your ships will obey you to the letter is another question. I've had ships get caught on obstacles, fail to see a clear line of sight on a target, refuse to mark an object marked as salvageable on the map, or simply not move at all despite repeated requests and both asking nicely and swearing.
I've got tracking errors. Going manual.
A lot of that is just bugs. But one thing that isn't is the fact that Hiigaran ships default to the neutral stance when they're built. That means fighters and corvettes will shoot back when they see an enemy coming their way, but won't scramble, which means they get wiped out really quickly if you don't manage to select them and change their stance first. Good luck doing that when you're under fire.
Any ship can interface with data spires.
One big Homeworld 3 idea, born of all these objects floating in space around you, is that a lot of the terrain has tunnels that you can pass through in order to bypass defenses and hit a target. But I wasn't wild about these because it felt like a very on-rails way to meet these missions. After the first novel time, it doesn't seem all that interesting, and it kind of makes the bad guys look silly for not laying mines at the exit. Also, it can be a hassle to get a formation of fighters, bombers, and corvettes to fly through them smoothly. Pausing makes it manageable, but they still often get caught on the edges.
Assault frigate ready for action.
Another terrain benefit is that it gives you surfaces to stick deployable turrets to. They're a bit finicky to place, it's not always clear why you can put them in one spot but not another. But you can redeploy them as needed, so there is a lot of flexibility. There's one mission built around them that shows how effective they can be if you can manage to turn an area into a choke point.
Alert, strike craft losses mounting.
It has to be said though that relative to Homeworld 2, Homeworld 3 feels simpler. I miss the options and rewards that come from mechanics like subsystem targeting. Without that, the only real nuance of battering down an enemy battlecruiser's HP bar, beyond choosing suitable anti-capital ship weapons for your attack, is positioning your ships to hit it from the rear for a damage bonus. But that's hard to do with everything moving and rotating around in combat. So the only way to manage it consistently is to fully surround your target.
Hostile spotted. They're charging.
Also, without veterancy to think about, ships feel entirely disposable. You do get to carry your surviving fleet from one mission to the next, but since experienced ships are no stronger than the fresh ones, all that does is save you a bit of time on harvesting resources to get up and running. On the other hand, Homeworld 3 does mark a return to building individual fighters instead of entire squadrons at once as we do in Homeworld 2, and that returns a welcome bit of extra control to how groups are composed.
That did it.
Having finished and enjoyed the variety of settings and objectives throughout the campaign, I was left wishing it had taken a few more cues from StarCraft 2 in its design when it comes to replayability. There are no optional objectives to try for on a subsequent run, and because each ship just has one upgrade to unlock instead of a choice between two or more mutually exclusive options, there's no real reason to come back for another go other than the simple challenge of cranking the difficulty up another notch. That's exacerbated by the fact that, in the campaign at least, Homeworld 3 has the fewest types of Hiigaran ships to play with in the series. That's mostly due to the fact that there's only one type of corvette. Instead, frigates are the backbone of every group, and that's where the vast majority of the Hiigaran's variety and flexibility lies.
Alert! An enemy destroyer is leaving the production bay.
Homeworld 3's campaign goes out of its way to change up the style of missions we fight our way through as Imogen S'jet seeks out a missing Hiigaran fleet and faces an unhinged enemy. The resulting battle of wills feels more consequential than the off-screen galactic threat behind it. Relatively close-quarters scenarios have you guiding dozens of ships through eye-catching gauntlets of asteroids and enormous space stations, and the dogfights and capital ship slugging matches that play out are a sight to behold. Being able to pause time and give orders makes managing your fleet much less overwhelming, especially given the tricky controls and sometimes disobedient friendly ship AI. Straightforward tech upgrades and a pared-down selection of ship types do limit the campaign's replayability, but building an armada and watching it tear through the enemy is always a satisfying sci-fi light show.
Ready on a quick charge cycle. Leading them in. Take the shot.
For more, check out our review of Homeworld 3's multiplayer modes on IGN.com, or our reviews of Terminator Dark Fate Defiance and Millennia. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
Control